to Down Your Unders. Down Your Unders. Review and dissection of content from some of the sharpest minds in the game. Hosted by Adam Camilleri. Art of War. Down Under.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another Index Review. Episode 150. I have no freaking idea at this point. I have recorded so many of these part ones and part twos of different ones in different orders all over the freaking place. I am joined by one of the, dare I say, youngest professional 40k players in the world. Well, that might be
pretty close.
It is, yeah. There's not that many contenders. I don't know how old Lennon was when he started, but he'd be the only contender, I think.
He was definitely younger than when he started, but he is about 6 months older than me. So that counts, I guess.
Suck it, John. Anyway, what do they call? What do they call kings? Was a king in Scotland just a king, or was it a thane? Or because I think that was
been a king. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it depends how far back you want to go, right? So if you go back to the actual royal lineages, yeah, a king.
Just a king, right? Yeah. There's no specific name for a Scottish king.
No, we name all we name is different words for lakes and things like that. People or whatever.
Yeah. Fair. So there's no boy king of... Yeah, never mind. There's no better boy king moniker is where I was going with that. And it went nowhere. But hey, it's Inez Wilson, everybody. Yay! And we are here.
I'm sure people hadn't figured that out.
If you didn't read the title and you hear Inez's name, you know there can only be a handful of possible indexes that we're reviewing right now. And we're doing the Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor. You know why? Because they are one of the best factions in the game. They have possibly the strongest detachment rules, army faction rules that we have seen ever, and they need to be unpacked at a very high level to that end. I reached over, my good mate, the Scottish WTC captain, was like, you know what, let's come on. But you don't only do that, mate. You got some other things you can plug.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2 main things I do on top of the Team Scotland stuff, which obviously is most of my commitment to 40k is through Team Scotland. I also work with StatCheck, so we do a live show every Tuesday, and we do a bunch of other stuff like ELO rankings for the wider 40k scene, and articles and a bunch of shows, whether that's covering team events or being very good at 40k while having other commitments. That's our private project. We've been coming up for a year of doing that now. I also, through that, now do full-time coaching. So if you're interested in that, do check out the website at stat-check.com.
Please do go over and support StatCheck. They do incredibly good works. Cannot wait to see them continue to go from strength to strength, and would be very excited to see where you guys are at in a couple of years from now, having started and been doing what you're doing for an entirety of an edition rather than, starting kind of halfway through as you did with Knights.
Yeah, for sure. We're very excited for all of the tracking and things like that for faction strength, ELO, player population, all that kind of thing that Jeremy and Cliff and Nathan do an incredible job on. We're super excited to see how all of that comes together. We're looking at getting resets done on all the the CRS and ELO, so people can keep track of how well they're doing relative to other players. It does a good job of showing international competition in a better way than ITC does. So we're a big fan of all the things that open up for us with a hard reset.
Absolutely. So, for those who do not know, Art of War Down Under is a two-part podcast. Predominantly, we are a review podcast. So whenever there is new content to be reviewed for the great game of Warhammer 40k, we will be reviewing it from the highest level we possibly can on this show. That being me, the sloppy Adam Camilleri, joined by whatever sharp-minded, three-headed expert I can pull on. And then we'll be dissecting all the new rules for said faction as deep and as thick and as juicy as we can get it. We are a competitive podcast, part of the Art of War network. And if you want the second part of this podcast, you can go over Art of War Down Under over on Patreon. That's the only way to get part 2, where the lovely Inez and myself will be writing some GSC lists and pretty much talking exclusively about our experiences with 10th edition so far and how GSC shapes up in this meta, what's good about it, bad about it, what it works against, what it doesn't work against, etc., etc. So if you want that, Art of War Down Under over on Patreon. So let's jump over to this index, mate, and we need your hot takes and first impressions. So first time you went through this index, top to bottom, what did you think?
Okay, so top to bottom, first time you read this index, you start with, obviously, Cult Ambush, which we saw on the previews, and you read it and you go, oh my god, I'm just going to run all the battle line stuff because it keeps coming back. And do you know what? It turns out playing 4,000 points in a 2,000 point game is quite good in general. I would generally go as far as to say that that's fairly strong. We've seen a lot of iterations of free stuff over the years, whether that's Gladius Strike Force and War Convocation in 7th edition, to Pox Farm in 8th edition, There's been loads of examples of just getting free stuff being really or even small mines and Tyranids in 9th edition, right? Having extra stuff you didn't pay for is quite good.
Absolutely.
And Genestealer cults absolutely take that to the nth degree. On a 4-up, every time one of your units dies, or infantry units on a 4-up, you get it back. And then if it's battle line, it's guaranteed because you add 3 to that roll. Battle line in this codex being acolytes and neophyte hybrids. So the sort of bread and butter of the army, the stuff that you were taking all the time in myriad cults anyway. And then there's a few other things, so sort of like the bikes and the neophytes and the aberrants that will come back on a 4-up. So you've certainly got a chance of getting them back, but you're going to always bank on that failing, which definitely leads you down the line when you're reading this codex of going, how do I make this battle line do what I want it to do?
Yeah, exactly right. And whilst there aren't a huge amount of data sheets, there is a lot of flexibility therein, and we have found that a lot of units are not very impressive on face value, but go to levels and then levels and levels when you find the right characters to put with them. And when ostensibly like over a third of your data sheets are characters, you can usually find some juice when you need it, right? Some flexibility.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely, there are a ton of characters in this codex, so there are, I think it's 13. 2 of them are lone operatives, and then 3 of them are sort of like HQ level characters from the previous book. So that's the Primus, the Magus, and the Icon Ward, and they all have a special rule that combines with the other set of characters, which is if there is one of those in the unit, you can put one of the like lesser characters in as well. So you get things like the Nexus, the Clamovus, and the Biophagus that can all join in alongside your other characters, which definitely gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of making your units. The one thing you do have to be careful with that is that the cult ambush rule does not bring characters back.
Correct.
So if your character dead, it stays dead. So you do have a little bit of tension there in that, yes, it's great that you can get your units killed and you only suffer like a timing penalty for that and that your unit's going to be gone for a turn. You will not get the characters back, and the characters are a big source of buffs. So it definitely does create a little bit of a...
diminishing returns.
It's kind of like, it's a get-out-of-jail-free card, not something you should be playing for, is kind of how we've landed up with. But that's sort of more we'll get into as we go through later stuff.
Well, let's jump into
definitely on first read.
Yeah, let's jump in on Cult Ambush. It pretty much says, like you said, if your faction exchanges to the cults, each time a unit with its ability is destroyed, roll a d6, adding 3 to the result of your battle line unit on a 4+. That unit is placed into Cult Ambush, and you can place 1 Cult Ambush marker anywhere on the battlefield that's more than 9 horizontally away from any enemy units. If it's not possible, no marker is placed. And so 4+ for just about every unit in Genestealer Cult's army, adding 3 to results, so you can't fail on the battle line unit, like Inez said. If an enemy model ends any kind of move within 9 of a cult ambush marker you placed, that cult ambush marker is removed from the battlefield. At the end of the reinforcement steps, your opponent's movement phase, for each of your cult ambush markers that is still on the battlefield, you can select 1 unit from your army that is in cult ambush and set that destroyed unit back up on the battlefield using the Deep Strike ability, containing all of its models with their full range remaining, with at least 1 of those models touching the cult ambush marker, is then removed, etc., etc. Then it goes on to say that the characters don't come back. Are you able to give us a little TLDR logistically of how this looks on the table? Like, so what happens? My last model in my unit is dead. What then happens? What's the sequence of events?
Yeah. So the very basic sequence is you lose your last model from a unit that has this ability. So that's basically all of the infantry and the bikes, accepting characters. You get to put down one of the little ambush tokens that you would have used for like the deployment rules in Genestealer Cults in previous editions. They then go down anywhere on the board that's outside 9 of your opponents. So sort of standard deep strike rules, where you're deep striking a token rather than a unit. And then your opponent then gets 1 basically full turn sequence, depending on when it died. So if you killed it in the shooting phase, they would then have their charge phase, your full turn, and their movement phase to try and get to within 9 of that blip. If they can get within 9 of that blip is removed, and then one of the units that you had in Cult Ambush is now stranded, can't ever be placed. And then if they don't successfully do that, then at the end of your opponent's movement phase, so before their shooting phase, so that, you have a little bit of options, like where they've committed to being, what they brought in from reserve and all that kind of thing. You then get to deep strike your unit with 1 model minimum touching that squad, or touching that marker, following standard deep strike. So if you want to do, long coherency chains to, put the, you have a 20-man neophyte squad with 4 seismic cannons, you want the 4 seismic cannons to be 30 inches away, you can make that happen. So there's a lot of little nuance to that. A lot of it ends up being like this mini game of how far away can you safely put a marker before your opponent can get to it, and then how relevant will it be there, and then you kind of have this interesting tension where maybe you put it in a slightly more aggressive place to try and force your opponent somewhere. There are a couple of mechanics that allow you to move them, so the Nexus and the Icon Ward both have, one has a move ability and one has a once per game redeploy it if it gets killed. So there's a couple of little ways to mess with it that way. But broadly, it's, if your opponent can't get to it, you just get your unit back. That's the very basic. And with the deep strike mechanics, you can often still have it somewhere relevant, even if you did put it somewhere fairly safe, as long as it's a large enough squad.
Correct. And so, theoretically speaking, should a unit get stranded without a marker to come down on, is it destroyed that turn, or can it wait for another marker to be used?
So it can wait for another marker. In theory, all of your units go into, at that point, cult ambush, or they go into, I don't actually know what the word is, I think it's just called cult ambush, and they go into a pool, and it basically says anytime that you would reveal a blip at the end of your opponent's movement phase, any of the units that's in sort of like your pool can come down. So you might, your opponent kills 4 blips on the turn, and you had 4 units that were dead. That's fine. If you then get another blip later, one of those units that was part of the 4th could be the one that comes down. There's no timing restriction on it being that turn. Units aren't associated with blips, aren't associated with turns, so you have a lot of control over that. It's often a good reason to have some smaller units, like 5-man Acolyte squads, 10-man Neophyte squads, so that if you do, have a unit that gets stranded, you can get a few blips and then, have a good chance of getting one of them back. So it does inform your list building a little bit in that sense as well.
And so whilst this is an extremely powerful ability, it's actually quite nuanced in its application. Like, you can get really technical with this. It like you said, the best way to do it after some games, I think we've found out, is to not go and get your stuff killed, because then you open yourself up to just having your blips turned off and your opponent has some agency. Whereas if you always hold the threat of the blips, things just get spicy. Like you said, you can pull people away, you can force people into trades and all sorts of other crazy crap. I would like to say a caveat at this time that we were recording this before any day one FAQs have come out. The Leviathan box has just come out, but as it sits right now, hasn't been any day one FAQs. Should any of this stuff changed, we do apologize. Should it be any different to the applications for a GT pack or anything like that in the future?
Yeah, I would fully not be surprised if they changed it so that you had to deep strike within a radius of the blip. Would be one that I think would be a very reasonable change.
I have seen some wild stuff happen with those blips, man. And
just because your squad can go 54 inches away from the blip doesn't mean it's a problem.
Doesn't mean it's broken mechanic, Adam. It's fair and reasonable.
Incredibly. I definitely don't play Genestealer cards. Don't worry about it.
No. All right. Brood Brothers, the rule sits adjacent here. Pretty much just denoting that if you play Genestealer cult, you can take an X amount of Astra Militarum units in your army, denoted by if you're playing Incursion, Strike Force, Onslaught. We, in this show and most competitive games, will be talking about Strike Force missions of 2,000 points. You can take up to a quarter of your army, 500 points, as Astra Militarum. No Astra Militarum models in that portion of your army can be the Warlord, and they cannot be given enhancements. You cannot include units with any of the following keywords in your army using these rules: Epic Hero, Ogarin, Rattling, Militarum, Tempestus, Commissar, Regimental Preacher, Regimental Engineer, Servitors, or Aircraft. Do Brood Brothers come up as something you might want in your Genestealer cards list?
Yeah, there's definitely a couple of applications. Anybody who's read the Guard Index will probably know the exact application I'm referring, which is Indirect. Indirect is always going to be powerful in a game where there are lots of walls. How powerful is up to debate, but right now it's definitely quite strong given the new version of the Indirect penalty, which Guard have a ton of ways to ignore, especially given all the new Forge Roll datasheets, which have definitely added. So there's a fair few datasheets from the Forge Roll side of things that are definitely interesting, things like the Praetor, the Archshaker carriages, the Medusa batteries, and then like the Manticore. And then you can back that up with sort of Scout Sentinels, which do a good job of giving you +1 to hit, give you some like reasonable Scout forward options, but it's not super necessary. It definitely does help, but it draws away from the core of the army, which is the things that keep going back. So there's a bit of tension there. But it's definitely something that you could consider in any army.
Well, with Indirect being so powerful right now, sans, of course, FAQs and stuff like that, I think it's a legitimate option. Like, usually, last edition didn't even touch the sides. Didn't get a look in. Was no point. This edition, there are some legitimate things here I think you can add to your list. Funnily enough, don't think you want any of the actual battle tanks. I can't see a Lehman Russ adding much to the GSC army. It plays so differently to how the rest of the army wants to play, right?
Yeah, exactly. The Manticores and sort of all the indirect batteries give you this nice little stable platform of it's fairly hard for your opponent to get there, which can give you some blip protection, which is quite nice. Whereas the battle tanks are a little more, they need to be in line of sight in order to do anything. And being in line of sight in the Genestealer army usually means death because not a lot else is getting shot. Because it's either fragile infantry models that are dead anyway, or untargetable for whatever reason. And adding a hard target for your opponent's army is usually not optimal.
Correct.
It just, again, creates this awkward tension in your list building. I could maybe see it if there was sort of a detachment down the line that encouraged more heavily things like the Goliath trucks and the Goliath rock grinders. But right now, under the Ascension Day detachment, there just isn't that much that's really super interesting for that kind of play.
perfect segue, because the Ascension Day detachment rule is they came from below, which reads, each time a GSC unit from your army is set up on the battlefield as reinforcements till the end of your next fight phase, weapons equipped by models in that unit have the sustained hits 1 and ignores cover abilities. So every time you get a little refresh on your unit or bring them in from reserves, they get to pop off, and they pop off pretty well. So this is kind of your pseudo crossfire tokens now.
Yeah, exactly. It serves a similar function. Exploding sixes from sustained hit ones functionally is equivalent to +1 to hit. It's a little different with when you start adding in rerolls, but the very baseline, it's about roughly mathematically 1 +1 to hit. And then ignores cover in the edition where everything has cover is very powerful.
I have stopped regarding ignores cover as ignores cover. It's just plus rend. I think I'm up to 5 games of 10th edition, and the amount of times I've shot it at something that doesn't have cover is less than 5. In 5 games, less than 5 times have I shot in a shooting edition where the opponent didn't get cover. Ignores cover is just +1 rend, man. Straight up. It's so crazy.
Almost always. Genestealer cults a little bit can get around that sometimes because you are so frequently setting up from reserve that a lot of the time you can hit the angle where your opponent wouldn't have cover.
Yep.
But it does cover, like, it means that you never have to worry about that. It was definitely a thing that if you were like pushing for it, you could probably find in cults a lot of ways, but there's no incentive, there's no need to, because the detachment will cover you for it. Which means that, you know, it's easier with 20-man squads. You can leave your icon behind a wall and still maintain, you know, not giving any unit cover and all that kind of thing. So it definitely works very well in the context of you having redeploys and blips and just natively deep striking a whole bunch of stuff to create a very powerful, constantly triggering effect that doesn't have the same level of hoops to jump through as Crossfire did. Crossfire was often a little bit of an awkward mechanic to like deal with on the table, and this just, you know, it removes a little bit of that skill dynamic, but also, you know, it wasn't really a skill dynamic. It was more of a, you must be this tall to play Genestealer cult. So I like it being I like it being a simpler mechanic. It's easier to explain. You don't need a laser pointer for that kind of thing.
Dude, it did get it. It was like bringing templates back. No, you're not Crossfire. Yes, I am Crossfire. You're not exposed. Whatever. Anyway, into the stratagem section. The first of which is unquestioning loyalty. This is 1 CP when your opponent's shooting phase or the fight phase just after an enemy has selected its targets. The target is 1 Genestealer cult's character unit from your army that was selected as the target of one of those attacks. Until the end of the phase, each time a character model in your unit would lose a wound, select 1 friendly Genestealer cult unit within 3 of it, excluding vehicle units. Your character does not lose a wound. That unit suffers a mortal wound instead. This seems pretty cute because, am I reading this correct, that this gets around to precision as well?
It does get around precision because you would take the damage on the character and then you can reallocate to the unit. It's, I don't know, I've never seen anyone use this one. It's definitely, your character is probably less valuable than the CP. It's honestly kind of the point. Like, you're a cult unit getting shot at, like, your character's dead anyway.
Correct.
It's kind of how it feels all the time.
It feels like if they're shooting the character, they've gone through the 20 wounds that the character was hanging with already, and the character was only there to buff the 20 wounds they were with. So why protect the character? Unless it's on an objective, and for some reason the unit within 3 is not on the objective. What are we really talking about here?
There's a couple of little things you could do with this. So, for example, if you have a lone operative character that gets caught in the open, you could use this to protect them.
That's
cute. If your squad has mortal wound protection, whether that's from the Icon Ward who gives the squad a 5+ feel no pain, or from being something like Aberrants who just natively have a 4-up, there are ways you can bounce some wounds around and mitigate the effects a little bit. So you can definitely like keep something alive a lot longer than you should, but it's not I wouldn't call this a high priority strategy. It's definitely the weakest of the 6.
Yeah, I do agree. All right, next one's yours, mate.
Yeah, so the next one up we have Coordinated Trap. So this is a start of shooting phase or start of fight phase stratagem where you pick 2 Genestealer cult units that haven't shot or fought yet this phase, and 1 enemy unit, and then until the end of that phase, so either the shooting or fight phase, until the end of that phase they can only target that unit, and both units get +1 to wound against said target. So this is conditional, +1 to wound for 2 units.
2 CP is the price point, and I think it's a bit of a value pick, especially when you want to get, you know, stuff like shotguns to be cracking tanks possibly, or light vehicles. I think it's actually quite a good breakpoint, yeah?
Yeah, for sure. This is definitely a stratagem you will use. 2 CP is a big premium for it. Very frequently, a lot of the units that you're firing at don't require 2 units to kill, and locking 2 units to only killing 1 thing can be quite difficult. Yep. A lot of the time you'll see something like, if you really need to kill like an Imperial Knight or Bellicor or something of that caliber, it's definitely a break glass in case of emergency. But this is a stratagem that you're always you always want to threaten, but very rarely want to use.
Correct. I was about to say, it's the one you always tell your opponent about, but slap down once every 3 games, maybe.
It does have a little bit of anti-synergy with the Nexus, which we'll get to in a little bit, but because it targets 2 units, you can't currently, under the general interpretation, use it on the sort of, if you target this unit with a stratagem, it costs 0, because the stratagem doesn't only target the Nexus, which means that it does have a little bit of, you will see a lot of stratagems get used because they can be used in that sense for 0
Correct.
CP, where this one doesn't quite work with that. So, you have a bit more CP to spend on it, but you maybe don't use it because it doesn't come in that free package a lot of the time.
All right, next up is Tunnel Crawlers. This is 1 CP in your movement phase. 1 Genestealer Cults unit from your army that is arriving using a Deep Strike ability. The effect is you can be set up anywhere on the battlefield as more than 3 away from enemy models rather than 9. The restrictions, of course, being unable to charge this turn. So they've always kind of had something similar to this. Since 7th edition, they've always had something to this effect, yeah?
Yeah, Genestealer Cults, it used to be move D6 when you set up, and then when the 8th edition codex came around, it changed to being the 3-inch Deep Strike, and then the 9th edition made it one of the points upgrades. But it's always existed in some capacity. Cults have always, from 7th edition through Index 8th Codex and 9th, and now 10th, have had ways to get closer on Deep Strike. It's been incredibly powerful every step of the way.
Oh, I just feel like I always want to have a five Acos in reserve, because especially when I pull my cards, I look at the objectives and I'm like, yep, cool, 1 CP, I get that card. Because people having the forethought to block out 3 inches from 5 25 mil bases is just a really hard arithmetic to do. And while I can do it on some objectives, doing them on every objective in the midfield, or their deployment zone, or table quarters, or the board court, or the board corners, depending on the cards you pull, it feels extremely strong.
Yeah, it's not something you ever want to have to plan around is the biggest thing for it. But yeah, this stratagem is incredible. It's very good for delivering some shooting units, things like the demolition charges.
True.
It's great for stealing objectives. It's great for setting up a move block with heroic intervention, requiring a charge mount despite it going to 6 inches. If your unit doesn't charge, there's no way they can roll it. And you can set up a lot of ramps very close to your opponent, such that if they do charge, there's a very hard chance that they have to base you and then can't do anything janky with power consolidations. So move blocks are a lot more powerful. A very easy way to access them with very big squads if you want them to is great. And the fact that this is no longer limited to 1 telegraphed unit now, where previously it was a 2 CP stratagem for lying in wait, a 20-point upgrade for 1 unit before the game. It's now a 1 CP stratagem that any unit can use. You can use it as many times as you like, which massively increases the power level and flexibility of this. This is probably the second best stratagem here, but I think you could make an argument for being anywhere in the top 3.
Well, I think this, even more than the last one, is the one that you tell your opponent about in every movement phase that they have. Remember, I can come in 3 away. Oh, did you remember I come in 3 away? Oh, it looks like there's a spot there that I can come 3 away, and just watch them squirm.
Yeah, they're just going to look you dead in the eyes and say, yeah, but I have Overwatch. And you're like,
True. But then you build a Vect into your list and you make them use it. You're like, do you want to spend all your CP on Overwatch? Because we'll get to the Vect anyway. 1 with the Darkness is up next. This is 1 CP. When your opponent's shooting phase, just after an enemy unit has selected its targets. The target is 1 Genestealer Cult's infantry unit from your army that was selected as a target of one or more of the infantry units that unit's attacks. Until the end of the phase, your unit has the stealth ability and can only be selected as the target of a ranged attack if the attacking model is within 12. Ooh, I like this a lot.
Yeah, this stratagem is fantastic. It was one of the ones that we were fairly high on from the initial previews, and then the rules commentary came out that confirmed that if you use this on the initial targeting, the enemy unit actually has to retarget if they weren't within 12. So what this functionally is it's counterspell for shooting.
Yes.
And it's, as it turns out, very, very powerful. This stratagem is great. You will almost always use this almost every turn. Uninteractivity is, as always, incredibly powerful for it. It's why indirect is so strong, because you can do damage without taking damage back. Genestealer Cults, they can stand in the open and shoot you and not get shot back. It is phenomenally powerful. It's definitely holding the faction together in more ways than one. And there are some abilities that we'll get to that stack with this, where you can make this even more obnoxious. So
I just have all the MTG Blue Mage Cheese Lords just tapping their 2 blue mana, whipping out their counterspell, because it's exactly right. As soon as you said that, I just had this. Yeah, never mind. And those SHIT eating Cheese Lord Blue Mages.
Look,
just like,
all I'm saying is that Genestealer Cults is blue-black reanimator with counterspells.
It is! Holy God, that's exactly what I was about to say. Took the word. It's Demir BS. Graveyard BS Reanimator Counterspell Yeah, so good. All right, tell us about Perfect Ambush.
Perfect Ambush is your generic, I want to make my unit better at shooting stratagem. So it's a 1 CP stratagem used in your shooting phase. For one unit of Genestealer Cult that arrived from reserve this turn and has not been selected to shoot yet, and it gets +1 ballistic skill and +1 to AP for ranged attacks. Just your generic white bread, I want my unit to be better at shooting.
Yes.
And it is so good for it.
You call the waiter over, you would like your dish seasoned. You'd like some cracked pepper on your shooting unit, please, sir. And for 1 CP, it will do the job better than it was going to. So,
+1 AP is a phenomenal buff, especially when you combine it with Ignore Cover, which you will have to your reserve unit. Our AP is one of those things that doesn't work the same way as armor save does. The better your armor save is, the better a save bonus is, right? So if you're 2-up save and you get cover, it's much better than a 6-up save with cover. AP kind of works the inverse way. The lower your AP is, the better the adding 1 to it is.
Correct.
So shotguns with AP 0 gain significantly more for going to AP 1 and ignoring cover than a las cannon at AP 3 does. It's still good in all contexts, but you just exponentially increase the value of AP the lower your AP is. And cults have a ton of ways to stack AP.
Beautiful. All right, Return to the Shadows is the last one. It is 1 CP. When in your opponent's turn, end of your opponent's turn, up to 2 GSC battle line units from your army or 1 other GSC infantry unit from your army. The effect, remove those target units from the battlefield and place them into strategic reserves. The target units must have the deep strike ability and cannot be within engagement range of any enemy units. So 1 CP, pick up 2 battle line units or any other 1 unit, just chuck them off the table, chuck them in reserves. Can they come in from a marker on the next turn?
No, they come in from strike the next turn.
Just a clarification, because I know that's going to be a question people will be asking, especially people new to GSC. Can I use this with my blips? The answer, of course, no. Is this any good?
So this is my pick for the best stratagem. It's the best stratagem that isn't Phantasm in the game for me right now.
Nice.
It's fantastic. So the very basic premise of this is that you can pick up any unit that has the deep strike ability and put it back into strategic reserves. There is a rule there's a clarification in the rules commentary again that came out at the start, just after all the points, that says if your unit has the deep strike ability and it's placed into strategic reserve, it can arrive using the deep strike ability. So you're not restricted to coming off a board edge with this.
Beautiful.
Which really means that it's just very functionally redeploy 2 units every turn, which re-triggers your ignore cover and plus
Correct.
every turn.
Correct.
The fact you can use this on 2 units, almost anywhere on the board, means that this is just it's sort of like the Blood Angels upon Wings of Fire from 8th edition, where you can just pick up your Sanguinary Guard unit and put them anywhere. It's the same thing, except you don't get to score primary with it first. That's the only real change from it. It's 1 CP, it affects 2 units. You can have a 3rd unit being affected with a Nexus. It re-triggers all your buffs, and it gives you unparalleled mobility across the board. So even if your ambush token got stranded somewhere fairly rubbish, you can pick it up and put it anywhere you want, re-trigger all your abilities, and go absolutely nuts. It's incredible for mission play. It's incredible for defensive play. It's just an incredibly powerful flexible strategy.
It's so good when you think of the value you get to regenerate. Like, you get to just re-get all the value back from all your... You're right. It's absolutely phenomenal. In saying that, it's funny that the first 2 are yeah, I mean, especially unquestioned coordinator trap is quite nice when you need it, but those first 2 are the worst 2, and then it just keeps getting better as you go down. It's really quite funny.
Might be the best page of rules in the entire game that isn't a Wraith Knight.
These 4 stratagems on the second page.
These 4 stratagems might be the best page of rules that exists in any index that isn't a Wraith Knight.
I don't know, that first page is pretty good when you're just oh, cool, I get to have twice as many points as my opponent.
But do you know what's even better than that is when none of your units can die and can be everywhere. Because they can't be shot and they redeploy.
And they can't be shot, and one of them can't be shot every turn, and 2 of them keep leaving and coming back wherever you don't want them to be. Seems good, man. And that is 2 CP. That's only 2 CP to do those things I just told you about. Very, very strong.
And it's going to be less than that when we get
started. All right, first of the enhancements, of which there are 4. This is Prowling Adjutant. Genestealer Cults model only. Bless them for needing to tell us GSC model only in the GSC only enhancements portion of the GSC only detachment. Hilarious. Once per turn, when an enemy unit ends a normal advance or fallback move within 9 of this bearer and the bearer's unit, if the bearer's unit is not within engagement range, it can make a normal move up to D6. Seems good on paper, but it gets a lot better than this here, I believe.
Yeah, it's incredibly fine. It definitely combos well with the Jackal Alphas and the Aberrants and Jackals, which is a unit that does mortal wounds when it moves. So getting to make 3 normal moves is pretty nice. It's definitely limited. All of these sort of 9-inch moves that require the enemy unit to end within 9 of you have the limitation that your opponent could just move away from you or just remain stationary while next to you. So you are putting a lot of impetus onto your opponent, but at the same time, it's a fairly cheap upgrade. I believe it's 15 points.
It is 15 points.
Yeah. Which means that it's fairly inoffensive. Like, you're never going to be too upset if you don't get a lot of value out of it.
I am finding that I always have a really awkward amount of points left in most of my lists. Like, I have like a weird 45-ish points left. I'm like, well, I need 50 for servitors or some other nonsense unit to chuck in, or I just find the most inoffensive other 2 enhancements I'm not auto-taking. A lot of the time.
GSC get away with that a little more than some other armies because their units are all fairly cheap.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can often just like make a squad slightly different, upgrade something, change a character, and fill those points. But yeah, definitely the kind of thing that you'll just put in there if you have some points spread.
What's the next one?
The next one up is Inscrutable Cunning, which is the ability to give your unit, so it's a Genestealer model only, making sure those Brew Brothers can't have anything fun. And while the bearer is leading a unit, models in that unit have infiltrators, so they're able to deploy anywhere outside 9 of the enemy units. And each time you select that unit as the target of a stratagem, on a 4+, you gain a CP. The 4-up to gain a CP is definitely a little bit flavor texty. You will sometimes get value out of it, very rarely will you. But infiltrators on any unit in your army that can be led, so Aberrants and Jackals are the main ones, but also just like 20 neophytes with that. Very, very strong option. You can just put them across your opponent's deployment zone and say, hey, you are going to have to deal with this. They're sat behind a wall. I'm going to slam the stratagem to not be shot if they're behind a wall, so you can't shoot me even when you're indirect. And now you have a problem right in your face.
Exactly right. Can you come and try and contest the mid-board when you can't see me and I have like an alpha level melee threat or even a shooting threat willing to just walk out of this or around this wall and just dunk whatever comes here? I think it's really good. Yeah, the 4+ to get a CP back is just cute, but the infiltrator portion of it can be really intimidating, I think.
Yeah, exactly. The 4, all these sort of like gain a CP abilities, especially if you're playing tactical objectives, do have a little bit of diminishing returns because neophytes already give you a CP on a 4+ when you stand on an objective, and you're gaining a CP guaranteed if you're discarding a tactical card every turn. So, there's only one. You can only gain 1. So it gives you a lot of redundancy in that 1 you're gaining, but you're still only ever getting 1.
Agreed. All right, next up we have Meticulous Planner, which is, Inscrutable Cunning, the one we just read, is 30 points, so quite hefty. But this next one is even more. This next one is 40 points, which is the most expensive one I've seen outside Knights. This is a Genestealer model only, of course. Once per battle, just after your opponent uses a stratagem, if the bearer is on the battlefield, you can select this ability. If it does, until the end of the battle, the CP cost for your opponent, so your opponent must pay to use that stratagem, is increased by 1. So that is a old school Vect as we know it. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, it's great. You put it in every list.
So good, so strong. I mean, you're almost doubling the points of some of the characters you could be putting it on, but hey, it's 40 points. It's kind of money in the bank, though.
As an army that is about as fragile to Overwatch as an army can be, saying that you don't get to do that as often is incredibly valuable.
So good. And what does the Design's commentary have to say about this when it combos with making a stratagem cost 0?
I don't technically believe the designer's commentary has anything to say about it, but it does clarify the order that operations happen in terms of math for 40k. So the generally from that understanding is that you would use a set modifier, which is set the stratagem's cost to 0, and then you would apply any additional subtraction to it, which would then add 1 to it, making it cost 1. So yes, this bypasses, your opponent is still going to have to pay a base level cost for things. That is, again, one of those things that is subject to change that could see a designer's FAQ on it, but at the moment, the best understanding we have is that it works that way.
And it makes it so much freaking better. I cannot tell you the premium now that I put upon the Vect-esque ability. I think if you can take one in your list, you should. It's really good. People only having 5 or 6 stratagems, and usually 1 or 2 of them being like the thing that they slap down every turn. Ingress, Overwatch being added into those bread and butter, possibly every turn getting slapped down. It just is such a powerful ability. Yeah, I'd almost pay 50 for it in some lists as well.
I mean, Space Marine players are out here playing 115 for a Calidus assassin, so surely paying 40 for it can't be that bad.
Exactly right. And you're slapping it on a unit that actually does other things, where a Calidus, that's pretty much 150 points.
One important thing to know with this is it does require the character to be on the board when you use the ability.
Correct.
So that does have a little bit of tension again with the way Genestealers like to play. So generally put this on something like a lone operative that's going to deploy on the board, rather than a unit that really has a lot of other things on its mind, like a Primus that would be deep striking. Do be careful where you have this, because it can you can't get backfired if you go to slam the Overwatch and you realize that your guy's actually in reserve right now, and you can't be doing that.
Agreed. All right, what's the last one?
The last one is Focus of Adoration, and they definitely not saved the best for last year.
No.
This is, again, Genestealer model only. While the bearer is leading a unit, you can target that unit with the Heroic Intervention Stratagem for 0 CP, and can do so even if you have already targeted a different unit with that stratagem in this phase. And this is a 10-point upgrade. It is definitely not better than any of the other ones.
No, this is the fourth best.
Yeah, and while if you only had 10 points to spare at the end of the list, I guess you'd throw it in, and you'd only be a little upset. But there's actually not a lot of units you really want to heroic with in Genestealer cults.
Mm-hmm.
Since you don't get the benefit of charging, slamming a bunch of toughness 4 or 5 up save models into your opponent is a good way to get your stuff killed for no reason.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I saw some just like Space Marines make it to 20 Acos. I'm like, wow, okay, fair. That baby transhuman, if you'll no pain, went a long way a little while ago. But yeah, this is easily the worst one. And have you found Heroic Intervention has come up much?
It's really good on Lionel Johnson, and I have found no other place to use it.
That's a great point, sir. It's fair. I have not seen it be relevant yet.
Yeah,
in fact,
I've found a little bit. Yeah.
I've been encouraging my opponents to waste their CP on it, to be honest.
The only other time I've really seen it get used is if you combo for Tyranids with Termagants and Von Ryan's Leapers on an objective. If your opponent tries to come close to you, you can move the Termagants fully back into range of the Von Ryan's Leapers, who can then heroic for free, and that's fairly good to turn. But again, that's a very different. That's like a free thing you can have on units that fight first, and you don't have a lot of that in GS.
That's really cute, actually. I love that. I love that combo. Wow, that's awesome.
So there's maybe you could probably do something similar with like Prowling Adjutant and like a Locust with Focus of Adoration is probably the best you're going to get. But the units that you're doing it with just aren't as resilient and don't quite do as much. But the Locust does give you fight first. So I think in a hypothetical world where melee was a little more playable, Focus of Adoration Locust is probably the place to look for that. But the units it goes in just aren't as threatening as like an Aberrant squad, which really wants Scribble Cunning for the infiltrators.
Well, perfect segue, mate. Time to talk about some data sheets. If you are joining us for the first of the index reviews because you're just a GSC lover through and through, we're not going to be going through every single data sheet. I'll be relying on my expert Ines to take us through the ones that are relevant to the competitive scene at the time that we are recording this. So this may very well change. If it does, apologies. But pretty sure now that we've got the points and we've got the scope and we've seen how the GSC play, there would need to be some very significant things changing to stop the following data sheets being completely irrelevant. So, Ines, take us to the first you wish to talk about. We're going to do a couple of characters, and then we're going to do a couple of the relevant data sheets. Of course, probably going over both the battle line ones because they're kind of ubiquitous. And you got to have
sure. So broad feeling for me, the ones that are worth covering is going to be the battle line options, a few of the characters, and then Aberrants and a couple of the vehicles is probably going to be the best bet. And then I'll touch on a couple of things that you might consider for other reasons.
Perfect.
So the unfortunate thing with these indexes, or for the Genestealer one in particular, is it's arranged in alphabetical order, which does make jumping around it a little difficult. So what I am going to do is I'm just going to start with the battle lines. So if you are reading along in the order, then you'll need to just jump a few pages around. So let's start with the easy one for going in alphabetical order. The battle line is Acolyte Hybrids. So these are your sort of they're the slightly more resilient ones. They're toughness 4 with a 5-up save, and their base abilities are Deep Strike and Declare Ambush, so they can come back. They have a rule that gives them reroll 1s to hit, and if they're targeting an enemy unit that's on an objective marker, they reroll 1s to wound. That's shooting and melee, and this one actually can do a little bit of both. And they have a cult icon, which is a common rule that shows up on a couple of units, which at the reinforcement step of your movement phase, they get D3 models back. Or if they're on an objective marker, they get 3 models back.
So good.
Very powerful. Notably does actually interact pretty well with Overwatch, where if you take a few chip damage, you can then bring the models back in your reinforcement step. So Overwatch, if it doesn't kill your unit, can actually give you some extra distance and let you sneak into places you haven't already.
Yeah, I've seen that be a thing. Like, coming on Overwatch, easier charge. Just it's still an objective that I wasn't going to take it before. Now it's mine. Really, really quite cute. What size units do you want out of these? You want to keep them lean at the 5 or go to the 10?
Yeah, so this unit is either 5 models at 75 points or 10 models at 150 points. And then you get 2 of the heavy weapons per 5. So the heavy weapons either being 2 attacks, weapon skill 3, strength 10, AB2, damage 3, or the demolition charge, which is a one-shot damage weapon, which is 6-inch range, D6 plus 3 shots at ballistic skill 5, strength 12, AP2, damage 2, with a million keywords, assault, blast, hazardous, and one shot. And then variably inside that, you can have some hand flamers, and everybody is baseline 3 attacks on 3s at 411, a little bit better for the sergeant with 5 attacks at strength 5 AP2. This unit is very multi-flavor, very multi-purpose. You will probably see a decent amount of 5-mans with 2 heavy mining tools just for a little bit of combat punch, finish off a vehicle, kill a couple of space marines on an objective, and some hand flamers. Very reasonable little skirmish unit for 75 points. It comes back, it tries again. You just continually do things. There's a lot of benefit to, specifically going back to Call Ambush a little bit. If you can get your unit dead in your own turn, so if you can have it die during your fight phase, then your opponent only gets 1 movement phase to respond to it, because it will then immediately come back into the next movement phase. So if you can do things with like little 5-mans, dropping them in, just rolling the 9-inch charge, if a couple of them hit them, you hit something, you try to pile into it something that's a little scarier, get yourself killed, come back, do it again next turn. It's very, very, very usable. It's not reliable, but it doesn't need to be. There's 75 points and they're scoring points if they're not doing that. So definitely does work. The 10-man squads, you are probably going to be looking at demo charges. So like the demolition charge, you run a 10-man squad. I'm going to very briefly run through the full combo on this because it is hilarious.
It's great.
So a full 10-man squad with Acolyte Hybrids will come with 5 hand flamers, which are D6 shot strength 3 flamers. Very, very usable with ignores cover. They'll have that from Detachment as well. And then demolition charges, you get 4 of them, which are, so baseline you're looking at 4d6 plus 12 shots, ballistic skill 5, strength 12, AP2 damage 2. Then you add on all the detachment bonuses, so that's now ignoring cover and with sustained hits. You add on a bunch of those stratagems we were talking about earlier.
The extra range.
+1 to hit, extra AP. They're now AP3 ignoring cover, and they are blast weapons, which means you shoot into a squad of 10 models, and you are getting a minimum of 20 plus D plus 46 shots.
It's disgusting.
They hit on 4s with exploding 6s,
Possibly
and native reroll 1s from their datasheet ability.
Possibly popping up 3 inches away from you.
Well, they don't have to if they're going to fire demo charges.
Yeah, it's just really good. All right, so jumping over to the neophytes. Let's go over here.
Neophytes are the second battle line option. So there are only 2 because this is about 7 data sheets in a trench coat.
Yep.
Neophyte hybrids are your guardsman equivalent. So they are toughness 3, 5 up save, 1 wound models, come in squads of 10 to 20 for 80 or 160 points. Their base rule is if you control objective in your command phase on a fort, you gain a CP, as I mentioned earlier. And their version of the cut icon is 3 models or D3 plus 3 if they're on an objective. So a little bit better, but the model themselves is a little bit worse. Baseline, they are armed with a las gun, rapid fire 1, 24-inch range, 1 shot at ballistic skill 4, strength 3, AP 0, damage 1. Stacks very well with a bunch of the output increase, but they're not something there is never a world you're excited about a las gun, no matter how many you black on it. No offense to the las gun. And then you are looking at 4 in any combination of 2 per 10 models, so 4 in a 20-man squad of heavy stubbers, mining lasers, and seismic cannons, and the same for special weapons, which is flamers, grenade launchers, and webbers.
Is it still going to be seismics and grenades, you reckon?
Yeah, very quickly running through it. The heavy stubber is a heavy stubber. You can do better. The mining laser is a las cannon that is ballistic skill 5, so it's one shot at 12, 3, D6 plus 1. And then the seismic cannon is a heavy gun, which is rapid fire 2, with 4 shots at ballistic skill 5 at strength 6, AP 1, damage D3. Of those, the mining laser and the seismic cannon are both very playable. With the exploding 6s and with some access to some rerolls that we'll get to from some of the characters, they are a lot more consistent than you think they are, especially the seismic cannons, which can come down 12 away and have 24 shots. You will roll average across the number of models you can bring in this army.
So I look at Rend 1 guns and I say, well, that's Rend 0 because everything's got cover. But as soon as I see Rend 1 with ignored cover, that's a good weapon. That's like a decent baseline utility weapon in the current game, I believe. So,
and it gets better when we talk about some of the data sheets.
These guys remind me of Guardians in 8th edition. Do you remember Guardians in 8th edition? Where they just had like one of the lowest floors but highest ceilings?
Well, like Eldar Guardians?
Yeah, Eldar Guardians.
Yeah, where you could just stack all the... the ones where you could put like 2 up armor save on the...
Yeah. You look at the data sheet and you're like, and then you start adding it all up together and like, oh my God, this thing goes through the roof.
And you can make them do so much.
It's absurd. It's
very quickly on the special weapons, your baseline options are the Flamer, which is, D6 shots at 401, and the Grenade Launcher, which is either D3 shots at 401 with Blast, or 1 shot at 4 to hit at 9-2 D3. And honestly, I am a big fan of 4 grenade launchers
too, man.
in every squad.
Have you seen the mirror yet? where it's like grenade, it's the grenade launcher
Oh,
blast.
so every single one of
game.
these is getting D3 plus 4 shots.
Dude,
and pretend you're a Desolation Marine.
Freaking
It's
hilarious.
great.
It's like 20 shots minimum from the 4 grenade launchers into the mirror match. And just like, ha! I shot first. Lol. Reserves. Lol. Reserves. Lol. And you just keep dunking on each other from reserve. It's hilarious.
And then the Weber, to finish up, is a Flamer with devastating wounds and it's strength 2. Which does mean it is actually worse than a Flamer on Guardsman in some senses. Because if you wound that on a 5, they're getting the save with cover, which is quite funny. But yeah, the Weber is interesting in the sense of, like, Flamers and Webers are interesting for Overwatch specifically. You are generally pretty danger close with Genestealer armies, which does mean Overwatch is often a very powerful option. But the grenade launchers just give you that sort of spike damage that you're really looking for. Strength 9 AP2 with the ability to stack up to an additional 3 AP and ignore cover onto them is pretty powerful. So, I generally prefer that.
And they will run you 8 points per model. So 80 for 10, 160 for 20. That is not too much at all. I love the price point.
Yeah, especially with the ability, as we said, the get out jail free card of if they do die, which you're going to do your best to prevent, they're just coming back. Yeah,
even if they only come back once, that's 360 points of value. Absolutely nuts. What's your next go-to non-character unit? We'll do all the characters at the end, I reckon. There's one
non-character unit, I think the 2 that are worth talking about are the Aberrants and the Jackals. Unfortunately, the pure strains are not as good as they used to be, and the metamorphs suffer from not being battle line. So just to finish on why we're not touching on them, and then the Achilles I'll talk about at the end as a vehicle because it's a little different. So the Aberrants are very baseline. They are sort of like the standard bodyguard unit from the edition. So a lot of the units have this. If you're being led by a character, you get -1 to wound if the attack is greater than your toughness. Aberrants being toughness 6 with a 5-up save and 3 wounds.
Really nice.
Seem fairly fragile until you pile in that 4-up feel no pain.
Correct.
Which is very, very good for keeping your units alive in a very scammy way. I've had this unit get shot by 3 manticores and shrug it off with 2 guys dead. It's quite hilarious.
Toughness 6 with pseudo 6 wounds because you're essentially halving the incoming damage, with variance, of course, is just such a swingy prospect. Like the over-under commitment on mental arithmetic of your opponent of like how much you have to put into them to guarantee they're going to die, like how much you have to expose to delete them. It's very exciting to me.
It's honestly just not worth doing. Chip damage them, and then let them charge in and be fairly underwhelming and deal with them once they're there. It's usually my recommendation for these guys.
My recommendation is if they take off in a big way, everyone take a Thunderfire and just do not worry about them anymore. Walk away.
Like you just start rolling negative charges, right? Like you just got to hope for the best.
Exactly. Well, you let them have one unit, then Thunderfire and piss off in the other direction.
So these guys are 3 attacks on 3s at strength 8, AP2 damage, 3 in combat. So sort of like the standard, a little bit weaker Thunderhammer. That hits a little better.
It's a little better than the Thunderhammer. The Thunderhammer's only damage 2 at the moment now.
I've been playing too much Deathwatch, I'm sorry.
That's true, yeah. No dev wounds on this, but 1 more damage. And
no dev wounds, but it hits on 3s is basically the kind of trade you're looking at. These guys they're fine. You're looking at 165 points for 5.
33.
Plus a character, potentially, so 33 points a model here.
Yeah.
They are exceedingly not cheap. There's a very real cost in including a unit like this in your army, where, 1, there's a ton of variance on the 4-up Feel No Pain, and also not being battle line, they are only coming back if you roll a 4+ on your call ambush check. Now, if this unit comes back, they are one of the best units in the game. If they do not come back, they sure are 400 points if didn't come back.
The reason I like them and love them, and please bear with me, because I do not believe this is a unit that should see play ubiquitously in every list. In fact, I think quite the opposite. What I love them for is that I Feel No Pain is now the only thing that works against every source of damage. It works against dev wounds, it works against shots, it works against melee, works against range, works against freaking everything. Works against Grey Knight's Vortex of Doom. It does not matter. It's actually better than an invuln, because so many sources of damage that are coming at you right now, ignore your freaking invuln if they roll a 6 or they're just Eldar, that a Feel No Pain, I think, is the best source of save, and the 4+ is the best source of Feel No Pain I've seen, pretty much. It's between these guys and Crypto's rolls.
Silence against psychic attacks, and that's about the best you're getting otherwise.
Correct.
I'm fully with you. There's definitely situations where a Feel No Pain can be worse than a vulnerable save. Like if you're a 1-wound model, you're probably going to want a vulnerable save rather than a Feel No Pain, because the second you start getting shot with damage 2, a Feel No Pain is doing significantly less. But once you're looking at this sort of profile where anything that's not damage, I would say 7 or higher, you have a decent chance of just passing.
Shrugging.
Is absolutely incredibly powerful.
I mean, like the harpoon off the of the Valiant.
Yeah, that's going to kill a guy unless it rolls a 6, in which case it'll kill 2 guys, right?
Exactly right.
Fine, fair enough. You brought a Valiant, you earned it. Like,
lol. Congratulations, mate. You got one. Yeah, it's pretty cute. All right, we will go to, what was the next one you said?
The next one is Acolyte and Jackals, which definitely are a unit that you have to divorce your 9th edition understanding of in order to see the value of. Because the first time you look at this data sheet, oh my god, it sucks compared to the 9th edition versions.
Yeah.
I was notoriously, Acolyte and Jackals had 7 special rules on a 12-point model on launch. And every single one of them was great.
It was insane. -1 to hit. You gave him an invuln very easily. You gave him feel no pain very easily. They fell back in charge. They were always crossfire. They could deep strike at the time. They can no longer do that. Best use of demo charges. It was crazy. Yeah.
So this unit is not the same unit. Acolyte Jackals are not even remotely in the same ballpark in terms of resilience, in terms of damage output, really. But what they do is mortal wounds. And they sure do a lot of them if you build them.
Oh boy. Okay, break this down. There's a lot to unpack here. I'm actually hoping this gets an FAQ. Well, it kind of needs an FAQ for one of the interactions. Well, the other one it seems quite clear to me, but break this down for us.
I personally think it should just be fine, because they're not even that good with all this. But the very basics is, they have a rule called Demolition Run, which is each time the unit ends a normal move, select one enemy unit within 6 invisible, and roll 1d6 for each model in this unit. For a 4+, they take a mortal wound. Baseline, this squad is 160 points for 10 models, including 8 Jackals and 2 Wolf Quads, or 80 for the 5, and I'm going to just verify that. Yep, 80 for 5. So baseline, you were throwing 10 dice at this, on average dealing 5 mortal wounds. You can then combine it... Sorry, Adam, please.
Sorry, I just need to interrupt for a second. So, an Acolyte Hybrid is 15 points a model, essentially. 10 models is 150. That is 1 toughness 4 wound with a 5+ save. For 1 more point, you get 2 toughness 4 wounds with a 5+ save. That moved 12. I mean, it's not battle line, but I don't understand how they've priced this.
I honestly think it is partly just the battle line privilege. Where I mean, Acolytes are an expensive unit. Like, don't get me wrong, 75 points for 5 toughness 4 guardsmen is a lot. But they have the damage output to support it. These guys are definitely. It kind of feels like Acolytes are a little overcosted, other than for the demo bomb, and Atalans are like about where they should be. I mean, like, the demo bomb is just wild, but I think that's a multiplicative stacking of buffs thing, rather than like the baseline unit being too cheap. Acolyte Jackals actually feel fairly fine. Like, they're not actually that great outside of this combo. But then, so to finish up on the combo, because this squad has like 2 heavy flamers and 2 grenade launchers and some 2-shot pistols. Like, don't worry about its damage output. But you can combine them with the Jackal Alphas, who's the special character, who's the character that can join these guys. And she allows the unit to move 6 inches after it fires, which means that you can do that ability again, because that's a normal move. And then if you combine that with the enhancement we were talking about earlier, the Prowling Adjutant one, if an enemy unit finishes a move within 9 of you, you then make a 3rd normal move, which allows you to move up to d6 and then again pick a unit within 6. So under ideal circumstances, this unit can throw 33 dice at 4-up mortals for an average of 16.5 mortal wounds.
It is pretty freaking wild. Because you're throwing 11, right? Because the Alphas is in the unit?
11 3 times.
Jeez, I've seen this. I have not seen this happen the 3rd time yet, but I have seen this happen to Be'lakor, and lol. A unit that would, under normal circumstances, be almost incapable of dealing a wound with Be'lakor without this rule, just walks up and half kills the fool.
It is, it's a lot. But the thing to remember with this is it's a 235-point unit with that character that at the end of the day does only come back on a 4+.
Correct.
And actually has an additional restriction. It has a downside rule where it has to come back from a caught ambush marker that's within 6 of that's only within 6 of a board edge for the unit.
Yeah.
So they can't do nearly the same level of shenanigans. And obviously the character doesn't come back the 2nd time, which means that they're limited to just the 1 demolition run.
Correct.
So this unit is very limited. Broad case best use scenario for this is ingress. You bring it on in your opponent's turn and then move it, jump at something, do your mortal wounds and bubble them and force them to enter move within 9 of you and take the mortals again, and then it dies and you never think about it again.
So
and that's completely reasonable.
They also scout 9. I can't remember if you said that before I interrupted with the Acolyte thing. But they scout 9 and move 12. And then you can advance and still do the demolition run. Oh, no, normal move on the demo run. So that's 21 inch and then within 6. So anything within 27 inches can technically be bombed turn 1 which is not bad as a threat range. Then you still have some misc shooting. It's not unimpressive for the points.
It's like
you'll kill
a couple dudes. Like you're not going to write home about it. And they can charge. They are strength 2 attacks at strength 4 AP2 in combat. It's not impressive, but it exists.
What I've found is that people look at this like it's still a durable unit now, and it just evaporates, man. It just freaking peers. Compared to how with the perception of 9th edition coming in and looking at 10 Jackals, like the 2 Wolf Quads and 8 Jackals, and you're like, man, that takes a lot of fire to kill. And you're like, it really doesn't. It really, really doesn't. Like they explode. They absolutely explode.
They lost their -1 to hit. They lost their point to save. And they lost their Feel No Pain from Myriad cults and their mini transhuman, and they don't have any regeneration within the cult icon anymore. I would comfortably say this squad is about a third to a quarter as resilient as it used to be. That's probably fairly baseline.
I think that's fairly accurate. And the other thing it used to do is it used to love -1 to hit, which is a lot more sparse these days because it doesn't have to smoke.
No, it has grenades, but no
has grenades though, and grenades though. So you could,
you can go do the 30-90 Yep,
yeah, baby. I was just looking at that, like, wow, you could just do a bunch more if you wanted to charge. Like,
you want to, on average, kill a 19 wound model. This is the way to do it.
Phenomenal. All right, let's go to the Ridge Runner.
Yep. So the Ridge Runner is the last of sort of like the generic units that I think is really worth talking about. The Goliath Truck and Goliath Rockbender are both very expensive, and as I think I said, I think they're waiting for a detachment.
Well, I don't get what this army gets from transports anymore. I think there was an extremely good case for it in 9th edition, but with how dynamic and how often they come back and the flexibility you have to just pop up wherever you want, I don't see what transports bring.
Yeah, so broadly, not much worth talking about. If you've got them, I don't think you'll be upset running like a truck to get people back.
Yeah.
Ridge Runners are disappointing, especially for 30 points more than a Fire Prism. Don't think about it.
No, don't.
Okay, so the Achilles Ridge Runner is your it's the low to the ground, has a twin heavy stubber and a top gun, and does some shooting. And this thing is very basically 12-inch move, toughness 7 with 8 wounds and a 3-up save. It's like, the sort of land speeder-esque platform. It's probably the best way to describe it. It has Scout 9, and the special rule it has is Crossfire, which is after it shoots, you pick an enemy unit that was hit by its attacks, and each time your friendly Genestealer cult units make an attack against it for the rest of the phase, add 1 to the AP of that. An enemy unit can only be affected by this ability once per phase.
Pretty nice.
That's a fantastic ability. Adding an extra AP, as we said, AP is the better, the less you have of it. So adding 1 AP baseline to all of your guns is incredible, especially into a lot of the hard targets we're seeing this edition, like Wraith Knights, Imperial Knights, even just like a 10-man Space Marine scope with armor and contempt. It doesn't love having an AP stacked onto it. You can then combine it with, it has 3 war gear abilities where it can either have a ballistic skill characteristic of 3, which is great in GSC. It can have smoke keyword, which you will never look at, and it can do the same thing for ignore cover, where when it hits an enemy unit, you pick an enemy unit that was hit, and all attacks against that model can ignore cover. Kind of redundant with the detachment ability, but something that you'll definitely keep an eye on for future detachments, which may not have access to that ignore cover. Now, the ranged weapons here, there is a twin heavy stubber, as you said, so that's your side gun. And then there is the missile launcher, which is 3 shots at strength 9 AP2 D3 flat 3 damage.
Yep, not bad.
Which is very boring. There's the heavy mining laser, which is technically a downgrade in that it's D3 shots, but because it's blast, it's strictly an upgrade.
Correct.
Which is strength 12 AP3 damage D6 plus 1, so a lot more consistent. And this is sort of like if you're going to build a damage version of the Ridge Runner, spotters and heavy mining lasers is the way to do it. Because you get hitting on 3s, exploding 6 if you can from reserve. Access to the +1 to hit stratagem gets that hitting on 2s, or the +1 physical stratagem. Hitting on 2s, AP4, ignoring cover. Very, very powerful little profile. And then there's the utility option, which is the heavy mortar, which is blast and indirect fire, 48-inch range, so a little bit longer than the other 2 options, with D6 plus 3 shots at 601. Again, baseline plus skill 3, but goes to baseline skill 4, but goes to 3 with the swap.
I really like the range and number of shots there. Blast with D6 plus 3 is essentially just going to be min 5 shots virtually all the time. 48-inch range is essentially all the table when you move 12 inches. So that's 60-inch range. That is the table. You can shoot anything you want as long as you can move in a straight line towards it. And then strength 601, sure. Yeah, it's pretty average. But when you factor in that essentially... So... there is a package here where you take 500 points of guard, and you take 450
So
points.
it only applies to Genestealer cult units. It does not apply to
I know.
others.
I'm just building a numbers battery here. We're not building.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, we're just adding. We're doubling down. We want just under 1,000 points of indirect in this list, because all we can get is 950, 945.
So yeah, these do come in squads of 1 to 2, and they are 75 points a model.
Yeah, so it's 150 for 2, and then the whole premise is you have 2 mortars that shoot at 1 target each from 1 unit of 2. That makes the next 2 units of 2 good.
So unfortunately, crossfire is each time the unit shoots, not each time the model shoots. So you can't actually split fire 2 mortars at 2 targets.
Oh, really? That sucks.
Yeah, they did think of that.
Boo. Wow, as if G-Dub had forethought like that to say,
I know,
you know
right?
what we're going to screw over? We're going to screw over Adam when he thinks there might be something okay about the mortar.
Honestly, for trying to come up with that monster of an indirect list, you deserve it. So
that's true. I absolutely do. Yeah, shame on me. What was I thinking?
For me, my mileage, these are almost as close to an auto take as you have of the things that aren't directly characters. The fact that they are a little bit more resilient, they can hold down your backfield and just plink away with those mortars very consistently with D6 plus 3 shots and plus a skill 3, even with the -1 to hit from the indirect penalty. Yep. You are delivering at least 1 hit onto any target that you really need, which means that you can trigger that +1 AP. So again, combining that +1 AP with ignoring cover and with the +1 AP from the perfect ambush stratagem, you can now have every single gun in your army that targets a target that you want to can be +2 AP and ignoring cover, which is a phenomenal damage.
Perfect. And I was about to ask that because I know there's going to be I try and put myself in some shoes sometimes. Sometimes I ask stupid questions, and sometimes I ask stupid questions on purpose. Maybe you can discern which one it is. Can you have multiple sources of plus to AP? You know, I know you can't have multiple sources of plus to hit or minus to hit.
Yeah.
So specifically,
the only restrictions on stacking modifiers are you cannot have more than +1 to hit, +1 to wound,
beautiful.
-1 to hit, -1 to wound, or +1 to save.
That's
can't
a
add
beautiful
more to
thing.
saving throw. But AP has no such limitation.
Dude, AP2 ignores cover, chef's kiss. Mwah. Beautiful thing.
No, increase AP by 2, ignore cover. If you add starting AP, your grenade launchers are now AP4.
Dude.
Then there is always the option that, remember, you are coming out of deep strike, and that sometimes ruins exist that are more than 6 inches tall, and you can put your heavy weapons up the top of them and have an additional AP from plunging fire.
I've seen plunging fire. It has come up more than I thought already.
Yeah, it's only for us to come up with Desolation Marines and GNC grenade launchers. That's been it so far. If you stick all those buffs on that grenade launcher, that's AP5 baseline.
I managed to pop it off with a unit of 6 Inceptors once, which actually made their bolt guns feel a lot better.
I bet it will. That does sound pretty good.
Yeah, actually, it makes them feel like a word, like an actual consideration when you can pull that off versus the plasma. All right, let's go to some characters, mate. Which one's first?
Sure. So for me, there are quick Karen, so we talked about the Jackal Alphas briefly already. The ones that are probably worth talking about are the Nexus, the Primus, and the Reductus Saboteur, and then I'll briefly touch on one more just for the benefit of others. But those are the ones that are definitely showing up in almost every list. Very baseline, I will say, though, the Magus is maybe one of the worst datasheets in the game, and it's quite funny. Just literally doesn't do anything. Doesn't even have a ranged attack from her psychic powers. She's just like -1 to hit. You know that ability that a bunch of units have that nobody cares about, where you have to roll 2 up for -1 to hit? She has that. That's her entire psychic ability.
Wow.
It's incredibly powerful.
Doesn't have a brain bullet?
Nope, not even a brain bullet. Neither does the Patriarch. Neither of them got one. It's so funny.
Yeah, I've been a bit incredulous at just how much worse Psycho units got. Like, because they used to be able to just default do D3 mortal wounds at will with a smite, and now they don't even have anything. Like, I thought every Psycho would get a default psychic boom brain thing.
Yeah, no, the problem is Thousand Suns got all of them. They have 57 different ones.
That's true. That is so true, man. Oh, that is hilarious. What a take.
Okay.
Right, I'm staring at the Clamavus right now. Tell me your story.
So the Clamavus is probably the most boring character you will probably play one of. Very baseline, it is a 12-inch no deep strike aura. And that is it.
Beautiful world.
For 40 points and the ability to hold a enhancement, you probably take one.
I think that is a great price point for that guy. I'm down.
Yeah, he is so boring. Literally, just stand on your home objective and you can't gab it, your opponent dropping it. Because Genestealer cults are very prone to not having a backfield because, well, what are you going to leave there? The stuff that's dead? No. So having the ability to just drop that in or, slap it into your opponent's deployment zone in the midfield after deep strike and say, no, I don't really feel like you getting to have this here. Clamavus does a completely fine job. You could cut one, you probably wouldn't miss it that much. But if you've got 40 points, it's better than putting in Focus of Adoration. So,
agreed. right.
Yeah, nothing exciting.
I found the Nexos next, so let's do that.
Yeah, so Nexos is probably the best character here. The
50
Nexos
points?
is,
50
again,
points?
a guard
Not
character,
expensive.
50 points, has Deep Strike, and then 2 abilities. One is Cult Infiltration, which allows you in each player's command phase to move 1 Cult Ambush marker. So that's the blips or the ambush tokens or whatever,
Bigger
the
than you
little
think.
things that come in the thing. Gets you to move it 6 inches, which means that if your opponent's set up to try and jump on it, you can pull it away. Or if your opponent hasn't set up to jump on it, you can move it closer and get a lot of options in a lot of mind games. There's nothing restricting you from having multiple Nexi and moving an ambush token more than once with that
Correct.
as well, which is quite fun. So you can just
that one's an FAQ watch for me because that seems
that
like
one is also an FAQ watch, but there are a bunch of abilities that say if like blah blah blah. If you one model can use this ability, including in this index. So I wouldn't be surprised if it did change. I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't change. It's kind of where I am with that.
Easy done.
And then the most important one is the battlefield analysis. So once per turn, select one model or unit within your army with this ability as the target of a strategy for 0 CP, even if you've already used that strategy. So remember all those really awesome stratagems we were talking about?
Yep.
Like can't be shot. Well, what if you did it again? Or plus, and you can do it in both turns. So you can, in your opponent's turn, double use one with darkness to make 2 units untargetable.
Yep.
And then in your turn, double use, perfect ambush on units setting up from reserve. Or,
correct.
3-inch deep strikes from units from reserve. All these kind of things. Now, there is one thing to watch for this. It does have the timing restriction where if you have a unit with a Nexus and a unit without a Nexus, if they target the unit with the Nexus first, you would have to use the stratagem at that juncture, at which point they would retarget to the other unit, which doesn't have the ability to use the stratagem even if it's already been used. So if you're going to try and set this up, bring 2 units with Nexuses, potentially even 3. Just make sure you always have the ability to slam the stratagem the second time on the second unit. Because otherwise you'll be really upset when your unit dies because your opponent knew how to sequence shooting.
Sounds fair, Matt, and very well explained for people at home.
Honestly, this guy is phenomenal, incredibly powerful, and also has that rule that we were speaking about earlier, where even if you have another character in the unit, you can put this guy in as long as that character is a Primus, Magus, or Acolyte Hybrid, which segues perfectly into the Primus, who sure does have a bunch of other rules, but mostly has the rule Cult Demagogue, which is while this model is leading a unit, you can reroll the hit roll for any attacks they make.
Dude, it's not melee, it's not ranged.
70-point Chapter Master, baby.
It's pretty freaking good.
In addition, with ostensibly less rerolls.
70 points, as much as you want. It's pretty nuts.
Consider, I would say, baseline, run 2 of these. 2 of these in 2 squads with a Nexus in each squad of neophytes gets you a lovely little package for 300 points of always able to ping pong off the board, always able to not be shot, always able to shoot. And you are going to come down every turn, re-trigger your full rerolls to hit, your ability to use the stratagem for +1 +1 skill and +1 AP, and also your exploding 6s and ignore cover. And
correct.
This is why the Cult Ambush rule is less powerful than it appears, because you do not want these guys to die, because if they die, the character goes with them.
Goes away.
And if the character goes away, your squad's output drops by about 100%. It is significantly better to just keep the characters alive. This guy also has a redeploy ability, which is fairly useful, depending on how your events FAQ it. I believe WTC at the moment is currently ruling that this works after the turn roll.
Correct.
It's very powerful, but we don't really know where that lies at the moment. That's another thing that's still waiting to come up from FAQs and designer commentary from GW.
Totally fair enough, mate. For 70 points, it is incredibly good value. Unbelievable value to my mind.
He also finally gained in the vulnerable save, which I have just noticed now, because I have just assumed that guy died every time he got looked at on it.
Well, dude, toughness 3 with 4 wounds and a 5 up. I'm not sure the 5 up involved is going to make much of a difference.
What? Yeah, but he did go like the last 7 years of me playing Genestealer cults without one. So, it's true. Nice to see
That's true. That is absolutely right. Was there one last character?
Yeah, the last one is the Reductive Saboteur, which is the bog standard, everybody needs a lone operative.
Correct.
Reductive Saboteur is an infiltrator, lone operative, stealth, deep strike, and then about 75 other special rules. All the special rules that Aberrants and Jackals lost, they found their home here.
Dude, what a lone operative. 55 points. 55 incredible. Points. Every rule.
They're also, for what it's worth, I think it's designed fairly well that there's not a lot of incentive to run more than one, but the first one is great, which I really like. So main things here, they do have one of those same demolition charges that the Acolytes we were talking about earlier have, except this one hits on 2s, which is a lot better. And also, because it's an assault weapon, it means that this unit can do things like advance in action. So if you're protecting your backfield, you suddenly draw the card for investigate signals, you can rush them off backfield to go and grab that because they can advance and shoot. They also have a little terrible indirect bolter, basically. D6 plus 3 shots, skill 3 at 501, with blast and indirect fire, but only 24 inch range. It's there. You were never Yeah, I have, not going to lie, forgotten to fire this more often than not. It's nice that it exists. You're never going to worry too much about it. And then two special rules. So primed and ready allows this unit to use the grenade stratagem for 0 CP, even if you've already used it, which means that you can just always, if you're with an 8, chuck out 3 mortal wounds on average, 6 dice rolling a 4 up. Nice to have. Nothing you're writing home about, but you would never complain to have it. And then planted explosives, which is once per battle, when an enemy unit ends a normal move, advanced move, or fallback move within 12 of the right saboteur, on a 2+, they take D3 plus 3 mortal wounds.
I love this one.
And there are no other restrictions on it. And,
is arriving from Deep Strike counted as a normal move? Or is
I believe so, because the unit is always... I think the rule for reserves says the unit is always treated as having made a normal move.
So if someone arrives from reserve, you could pseudo Overwatch, just throw the bomb at him, right?
Well, you could also regular Overwatch with another unit.
Right. Yeah,
but yeah, so it's 2+ to do D3 plus 3 mortal wounds. Very, very powerful with Lone Operative, in the sense that you can only be shot if you're within 12, so if you can just, chuck 5-ish mortal wounds onto anything that comes near you, there's a good chance that your opponent just won't bother shooting, won't bother trying. The main thing to note with that is you can only use it once per battle round, no matter how many saboteurs you have, which means there's diminishing returns in that if you have a little nest of 2 saboteurs that are nearby each other, and your opponent throws the same unit within 12 of both of them, they're probably going to get both of them, which does mean that there is a little bit of attention in running more than one, which I think is a good way to balance out this unit, because it's very powerful, I think, for 55 points.
It would be
probably a little undercosted.
How busted would it be if you're 165 points, you just have 3 of them sitting together, and the first thing to walk into zip code just takes 12 auto mortal wounds minimum.
Into the middle ruin.
Dude, you freaking would. And you freaking would. It'd be like, you got to move. You got to move. Are you going to move? You going to move? Nah. We would blink. Yeah.
Actually, we'll kill an armor, get it fun. Yeah. Saboteur is great. Very big fan. The other lone operatives are the Sanctus and the Kellermorph, so kind of like that general package. The Kellermorph is a 12-inch range gun lone operative, which is a little bit of a nombo. I usually don't like being within 12 of the thing I'm shooting with my lone operative.
See,
the Sanctus is kind of low impact.
I assumed his lone op would be if he's hanging out with a unit, because he's supposed to be the inspiration. The whole premise is he's the inspirational gunslinger. I thought if he was within 3 of a battle line unit, he got lone op.
Yeah,
but no,
I think the Kellermorph is maybe playing for 2.5 editions of Sin now.
Oh, absolute Sin, man. His gun sucks so much now compared to what
his gun is great if you can roll 6s. He has sustained hits D3 and devastating wounds on an AP0 gun. So if you can roll 6s to hit and get D3 additional hits and 6s to wound for flat mortals, it's great. I'm not that good at Warhammer, so
if you spend 2 CP and have a rich runner, maybe that gun is good. Maybe. Or maybe just use it on 20 neophytes and enjoy your life.
I welcome you to trying it, Adam. Please be my guest, but I will, for one, not be partaking in the Kellermorph.
No.
But no, that's
I will not.
very broadly, that's the cult set. There's a ton of really great units in here. You can build a lot of different ways. I've seen 30 Aberrant builds that look super fun. I've seen lots of neophytes. There's you get some melee in this list as well, which is worth noting. Those Acolyte squads definitely do hit in combat, and you will charge things with them, which is nice. It's always good to, at least get to pretend you're playing that kind of game. But, it's a super cool codex. For me, it's the second best codex in the game right now. I absolutely adore all the design choices. I wish melee was better, but I feel like it's because this is the white bread detachment, the one that they've printed for everything to have a little bit, and we've got Anointed Thong coming that'll give me my Aberrant list. That's what I'm waiting for.
Oh, dude, well, exactly right. There's probably going to be the Rusted Claw list that'll give you all the Jackals and the trucks and stuff back, and then there'll be, could very well be a Twisted Helix X1 just for the Aberrants and stuff.
Just thinking back to the 8th edition, not the Psychic Awakening, the one that had the Deliverance Broodsurge and the Anointed Throng. Deliverance Broodsurge was rush you in trucks, and the Anointed Throng was Aberrants that fight on death. And I can definitely see those kind of things being the baseline for new ones.
Agreed.
And I'm very excited to see where they go, because the data sheets have a ton of potential. I like that this does generically, everything gets a buff. You can do all the cool janky stuff. There's so much tactical depth and nuance in this army, but it also is so much easier to play than the mirror cults of the previous edition, which really did have there was not a lot of fail states. This army gives you get out of jail free cards, which helps you ease into that play style better.
It really felt like you had to climb 9 flights of stairs to get to the floor of the skill set of the previous build, whereas this one is maybe 2 stairs. Just
exactly.
2
It definitely
small steps.
is a lot easier to play. I think there's still a lot of depth to it, and the best players will still phenomenally outplay you.
I think this is the
actual
I think this is the army more than any other I've seen this edition that will generally demonstrate generalship on the table extremely well. Like when you get tap danced by a GSC player, it's because they outplayed you, like legitimately.
It definitely feels like all of these return to the reserve at the end of your opponent's turn. So this army has them, Grey Knights has them with the generic army rule, and Deathwatch have it as well with 2 kill teams. Have definitely felt like the most dynamic and interesting to play armies of the edition so far. And I think it's a really cool mechanic in the sense that it rewards you for being active in the game. Correct. Rather than playing a very passive and sit-back game, which I think is a lot of the goal.
Always thinking, laying traps, looking for angles, looking to pull and push your opponent in certain ways. I think it's extremely wide. Like you said, it causes you to be active and like constant arithmetic. I really think it's exciting. And as far as that, I'm going to pluck your brains in part 2 about whether you think this needs to be fixed, because I've already had some players out there saying that it is oppressive just playing against twice as many points as you brought.
I played a game, so one of the first games I played against it, my opponent described the feeling as claustrophobic.
It did, dude. I've seen it on the table, and people were just like drowning in waves. And then I've also seen people who are playing Deathwatch with like 20 Desolators just being like, I probably could have killed 6,000 points. It just doesn't really matter.
The first time I played against it, I played Deathwatch, and I killed 4,000 points in it. And the rest I only didn't kill because I killed the Blitz too.
Exactly right, because they're just like, you can have some more, it doesn't matter. So it's really is like there's the armies that have no freaking chance of handling what GSC is bringing, and then there's the armies that just handle it sitting on their hands, and that really does seem to be the dynamics of 10th edition right now. As it's unfolding,
the have-nots.
Exactly right. Yeah. There is a huge freaking cliff between the top 3 or 4 factions, and then just the peasantry, or so to speak, just the rest, the rabble. In the streets outside the castle where all the riches get to sit at their long table. Anyway, I do believe this is an S tier faction. I believe it's sitting 1 rung below Eldar in my estimation, and it would not take much. It would not take many hits to Eldar to put them on par.
For me right now, Eldar is much better than GSC as GSC are than Death Guard, and then you start getting a little bit more after that.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I do think that Eldar is particularly decent at smashing GSC, unfortunately.
Yeah,
so there is
everything Eldar does rips GSC to bits. The power of the Overwatch is just too much right now.
Exactly right. When you can just slap down slap down the 6s.
Yeah, getting 2d3 plus 8 shots on your Wraith Knight into a 20-man brick is maybe a little egregious.
You think? Absolutely diabolical. But anyway, mate, on that note, we will close this out. Thank you very much for coming on. Can't wait to do part 2 with you. We'll be talking about GSC list construction, what you want to see on your list, how you want to play, what's good against, bad against, how you want to wield it on the field, and just some of our musings and learnings on 10th edition so far. How many games in are you, mate?
I think I've played my 20th game this weekend.
Nice.
So on Sunday, 9 days after points, I played my 20th game.
Beautiful. Love to hear it. Well,
I might play so much more Hammer.
Mate, that good old WTC grind. Get into it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, we did a practice weekend, and I started a game at 11 p.m. on the Friday and the Saturday. I'm like, maybe I should sleep more.
Well, on part 2, we'll actually pontificate about some predictions about WTC as well, because, dude, it is the wild freaking West this year. Anybody could win, because they've just hit the treasure trove of good tech that someone else might be sleeping on. But anyway, mate, thank you so much for coming on. Please go over and check out Stats Check and jump into that Patreon as well. You might see me there because I am a patron of said channel. I do enjoy my patronage and do enjoy the show. Inez, you've been such a gent. Thanks again for coming on, mate. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Adam. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to being back in a couple of days for the rest.
Beautiful.
Or 30 seconds for everybody who's on Patreon.
Yeah, you lucky ducks.
Or we're down under.
Yeah, well, because it's just gone 12:30. It's just gone midnight where I am. So
the linear passage of time is fake, and nobody recognizes it.
Dude, time isn't real. And neither are pigeons. Anyway, see you later.
Thank you for listening to Art of War Down Under, a content review podcast for Warhammer 40K, hosted by Adam Camilleri, produced by Seamus Ronan. Enjoyed the show? Want your lists reviewed and the content you heard put into practice? Sign up to our Patreon and connect with us online or on Facebook. Just search for Art of War Down Under. Signing out from tomorrow.